When everything is marketing and marketing is everything, taglines and trends are just the tip of the proverbial iceberg. On the M Word, we're talking marketing and mission and the pursuit of what's personal. I'm your host, Jennifer Mulchandani, and you are listening to the M Word podcast presented by Arlington Strategy. On this episode, I talk with Brian Ver Straten, Creative Director and VP of Marketing at TTR Sotheby's International Realty. Brian's branding career has included stints at Barnes & Noble and Major League Soccer's DC United. I really enjoy Brian's story of getting his first creative job. Listen in on how a wrong email was the launching pad for his successful career in design. Well, today I'm excited to welcome you, Brian, to the M Word podcast. Thank you for being here.
Thank you, Jennifer. It's great to be here. Thanks for having me.
Of course. Well, I'm excited to talk about, your journey through design and branding, and really how that correlates with marketing. But, I'm just really curious, your overarching journey. You started with Barnes & Noble, which still is holding on.
Yeah.
And you've had a really interesting journey with a lot of big brands. And give us a little overview of your career.
Sure. I guess it was roughly 15 or so years ago. I was living in New York, and I kind of, my whole creative career started as an accident, to be honest. I was straight out of school, and I got kind of an entry-level job at the Barnes & Noble headquarters. It was kind of like a satellite headquarter office on Long Island in New York. And I was doing kind of entry-level work, nothing marketing related, nothing creative related. It was actually kind of like a human resources gig. And I was, 23 years old, just trying to get my foot in the door at a company and kind of test the waters. And about a year or so into that gig, I received an email that was intended for a different Brian. It was from a guy named David, and his email signature indicated that he was in the creative and advertising department. And I didn't know what that was. I didn't even know we had a creative and advertising department. I didn't go to school for design. I don't have an art degree. And the email basically was a bunch of proofs and creative concepts for store displays. And it was asking for not me, but a different Brian's approval on the designs. And I, kind of being the smart ass that I was at that age, I wrote back with my creative opinions, and then responded at the end saying, and by the way, you sent this to the wrong Brian. And
okay, this is fantastic.
Yeah. So this guy, David, he responded, apologizing for sending it to the wrong Brian. And then it started a conversation. And I told him, I don't know what goes on in your department, but I want to be a part of it. It sounds interesting. I would love, I feel like I'm a creative person working in a non-creative role. So if you're ever looking for somebody, let me know. And like a year later, he reached out to me, and they were looking for somebody in their department. I took the train to New York City, went to their actual headquarters, not just like a little satellite office where I was working, which was on Fifth Avenue. I felt like Don Draper, walking down the street.
Right.
And I got the gig, and I became part of their creative team I guess I was with them for roughly 5 years.
Okay, but let's back up. What did you study in school?
Yeah, so I went to school for music, which was kind of funny.
Okay, but that's creative at least, right?
It's creative, yeah. So I spent 2 years, probably a little over 2 years as a music major. I realized pretty far along that I didn't really need a degree in music to do music. So I figured, I'll keep making music, but maybe switch degrees to something that could be more practical, in the long run. So I did switch to just a kind of general marketing degree, and that's what I did graduate with. But I never had a vision for graphic design or for art direction. I'm probably the only creative director that you'll meet that doesn't have an MFA or doesn't, didn't go to art school. It kind of just stumbled upon me.
So did you have to like play catch up real fast in terms of, the design software and just systems and color theory and all the things that creatives in that space have to work with on a daily basis?
Yes and no. It's kind of funny. I always, I kind of self-taught myself how to use programs like Illustrator and InDesign and Photoshop when I was like a teenager. At the time it wasn't Napster, but I think it was like LimeWire, one of those like illegal downloading sites. And my brother, I think, downloaded like an illegal version of Illustrator, back in the late 90s or early 2000s. And I started just playing around with it and making posters for my friends and bands and things like that. And so I was always dabbling in creative software. I just never had formal training in it. So the things that it would take me probably an hour to do, a true designer probably knows 10 different shortcuts to get it done faster. But
right.
So I had that advantage. And when I joined the Barnes Noble team, I kind of quickly realized that, the creative team, they did a lot of in-house design, but they also farmed a lot of it out to agencies, big time agencies that would do big campaigns and all. And when I joined, I was project managing a lot of work between what was going on in-house and what was going on out of house. And I quickly realized like, well, the stuff that you're farming out, like I could do that, and I started designing it and kind of saved the company a lot of money and started to, flex my creative muscles by doing stuff that, they were paying six figures to agencies to do. So it was a cool gig. It was, working for a retail store like Barnes Noble, which at the time we had well over 700 retail stores. When I was working with them, places like Borders still existed. Amazon was still a bookstore in theory. So it was a different place than it is now. But, you work on everything from big national campaigns to store signage to, gift cards, coffee sleeves, shopping bags. Every little thing. There's so much creative materials that take place within a store. So it was a very cool experience.
Right. And so, starting in that retail space, you had your marketing, sort of the formal marketing training from school, this like discovery of your, passion from an art direction perspective. And now in addition to freelancing with numerous brands, you also are embedded in another worldwide global brand, TTR Sotheby's, right? Sotheby's. I always add an extra.
It's a lot of people do. It's okay. Yeah.
So is it similar in that you get to, from a creative perspective, touch, the whole universe, the omni-channel reach that they are going for? Or are you working in a specific part of the company?
Yeah, that's a great question. So yes, I work, Sotheby's is a 275-year-old, brand, which is incredible. And obviously its roots are in the auction business, which most people think of as probably just art, but they auction off everything from, t-shirts, skateboards, baseball cards, sneakers, posters, cars, wine, boats. They do so much. It's such a cool lifestyle, aspirational brand. I work on the real estate side of things, but we try really hard to weave luxury real estate and the lifestyle of the Sotheby's brands closely together so that, if you're a collector of fine art or fine wine, you're probably a collector of luxury real estate as well. So we kind of blur the lines between the two different sides of the company.
Yeah. So I think what's, curious just even working with junior staff here who come in as creatives and they discover marketing, and the vice versa is like, yeah, I work with marketers and then they discover sort of the role of brand, like the art side of brand. How much of your thinking is thinking from the marketer's perspective when, what does that integration look like from when you're working on campaigns or design?
Yeah. It depends on the campaign. Specifically, let's say in my current role in the luxury real estate space, I think my mindset is always it's always consumer thinking because our brand is a heritage brand, with nearly 300 years of all this legacy, and it stands for so much. But it can also be a little bit of a weakness because some people might think that our brand is untouchable or unobtainable. So if we don't, for example, we don't have a minimum price to represent your property. Like the Sotheby's brand will sell any price property and still give it the same white glove experience that we would give. So that's something I think a lot about is how do we get the consumer to view us as a brand that represents all price points? And so it's kind of, looking down market as opposed to up market, which I think a lot of other brands try their best to achieve. So that's kind of the current way that I think about most marketing campaigns. How can we appeal to this kind of new generation of luxury buyers, letting them know that luxury is not a price, luxury is an experience that you receive from our brand.
Right. What's really cool about that is, you think of, young folks, maybe those not quite yet in the real estate market, even though like the desire to be luxury adjacent, right? You see the memes, you see the moms are like, just a woman wearing, Walmart clothes and knockoff shoes, taking my child who's dressed from head to toe in Lululemon and, with their Stanley Cup to get their fancy coffee, right? Like the younger generation, I think, has this affinity for brand in a way, luxury and brand, in a way that I'm not sure, the Gen Xers of the world have the same from such a young age. I mean, we grow into it, right? With upward incomes and things like that. So let me ask you, from just as someone in a creative space, like other than the brands you work with, are there brands that you think are just killing it out there that you really admire how they approach their art and their overall campaign approach?
Yeah, I mean that's such a good question. I admire any brand that has surprisingly good design, and it doesn't. I don't. I don't limit myself in the types of brands that influence me or at least inspire me. I used to work in sports, so I follow a lot of sports teams that do really, sexy branding that I love to see. In the luxury, world, I'll follow anything from a ton of furniture brands that do really good catalogs. I'm a sucker for a good catalog, and I get tons of them from brands that I never buy, but I just love looking at their catalogs. It could be a catalog for a sink company or faucets, but I don't care if they put a lot of effort into their design. I love it. So I'm just kind of a design, for someone that didn't go to design school, I kind of consider this my schooling. Like I'm getting textbooks in the mail from cool brands that I get to just look at and get inspired by.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you see design changing? Like, is there a is there, you talk about Sotheby's, like the 300 years of historical brand and sort of that legacy, but when you think about art and design, is there a trend? Like, are you trend hopping? Are you trying to lead? Is the idea here to be timeless?
Yeah, that's a great question because I do, you know, when I left, let's say if I zoom out a little bit, when I left um, Barnes and Noble, my next gig was the creative director for a sports team. And I did that for quite a few years. And then I left to go to a real estate brand. And a lot of people ask me, like, how would you go from being the creative director of a professional sports team to real estate? That sounds like it does sounds boring, right? And to me, it wasn't about real estate, and it still isn't. I wasn't interested in getting involved in real estate. I'm not a licensed agent. Like that's just not something I'm into. To me, it was about the brand. I was excited to join a brand that has heritage and that has uh, so much creative content. At the same time, I always feel like and I still do, but I hopefully have put a dent on this. But I feel like the bar for design within real estate has been set really low. You can open any newspaper or magazine across the country, and you'll see the stereotypical real estate ads that look terrible. They're over designed. You'll see, bus ads and, benches with people's faces on them. Like for some reason, the real estate market started off with really bad design, and it kind of stuck with them for a long time. So I was interested in joining a brand that had all this sexy heritage, and taking the real estate side of it and getting to look closer like a luxury brand and way less like a real estate brand. And that's what I've been doing for the last 8 years is, really refining everything that we do from a design stance that it's, I want to surprise people with how elegant our design is and not salesy and not stereotypical real estate design.
Yeah. So who do you like, how do you get feedback, right? Like in terms of, do you have a team? Do you workshop things? Like, how are you as the creative, knowing if you're hitting the mark or, who's the arbiter of how well you're doing, if you will?
Yeah, there's a couple different, ways that I've found, successes along the way that know that I'm heading in the right direction. Pretty early on, when I joined the Sotheby's brand, mission number one was basically to update the design of all of the materials that I felt like were lacking the elegance that they could have had. So I started updating the design and redesigning so much stuff in the early days. And I started to see that stuff appear across the country in other places being mimicked, which I felt like, okay, this is cool to see that, people are picking up on this design that nobody else was doing prior. And then I remember this one moment. I was probably a year or so into my gig at Sotheby's, and sometimes I get called in to kind of help recruit top talents to our brand. So if you're a big real estate team or agent that's working for another brand, and we would love to have them work for us, we'll have a meeting with them and we'll tell them, all the great things about our brand. And sometimes I get pulled into those meetings to talk about marketing and talk about the power of our brand. And for this particular one, I showed up and it was a team of probably 12 people and, one of the top real estate teams in the region. And I started talking about design and marketing and how I think about all of our marketing materials and how I'm trying to elevate everything that our brand touches. And I started talking about one particular thing that I've designed that our agents can use. It's a booklet, that talks about the power of our brand and agents use to get listings. And I started talking about it, and the agent said, "Oh, I know what you're talking about." And she reaches into her purse, it was more like a duffel bag, and pulls out the piece that I've designed. And I was like, "Oh, interesting. where did you get that from? And she says, well, I went on a listing appointment to try to win over a listing for a $30 million property. And while I was there, I gave my pitch, and on the way out the door, the homeowner handed me this presentation saying, you know, you should probably join Sotheby's because look at the stuff that they do compared to what you just gave me, which I thought
Wow.
was crazy that, sellers and clients outside of our brand were holding on to materials that I was making. Um, a lot of the things that I design, I try not to be disposable. I want them to be sticky. I want them to be, sit around for a long time. So when we do brochures for properties, these aren't, bifold, 2-page brochures. We're talking about like, hardcover 60-page coffee table books that people hold on to and they don't want to throw away. People
Right.
will reach out to us and say, can we order more? Because I want to send some to my family. Like people want these things because we put so much effort into designing them well. So those kind of indicators along the way mean a lot to me.
Sure. So, but what's the flip of that? Like, where do you get the, oh, missed the mark, or oh, that fell flat, or, where have you screwed up?
you know, um, Most of my screw ups are very small, not to pat myself on the back, but most of mine are usually little things like typos. I'm a sucker for bad typos, probably because things like InDesign and Illustrator don't really have a great spell check. So
Every designer I've ever worked with says that.
yeah, I've made
If you're listening, Adobe.
yes, please, please. There's been quite a few things that we've produced that have had typos on them that I've found, later. I remember when I was working for DC United, we used to do like pocket schedules. Like if you go into like a coffee shop or a Dunkin' Donuts or something like that, there'd be like a little, display of home and away matches, right? And we would print, tens of thousands of them. And I remember having a really terrible typo. The word available, I mistyped on the cover of it. And we printed like, I think 30,000 of them, right? So I made some typos along the way, but luckily in recent years, I think I've been heading in the right direction. No, knock on wood, no huge fuck ups. But yeah, it's been a good journey so far.
Well, that's great. So how do you, working with not just Sotheby's, but like any brand that you're working with, how do you ensure that sort of the essence of the brand, like the what matters, whether it's values, sort of underlying, sort of purpose, mission, gets reflected? Is that more coming from an aesthetic place, or is that, it's in the brand guide, so just follow the brand guide, or like, how does design work in terms of reflecting what matters to, whether if you're doing something personal or you're doing something on behalf of somebody?
Yeah. Um, you know, I think for me, and this is probably because I'm not, a formally trained designer. But for me, the most important part of design is the backstory.
Mm,
And it's probably one of my greatest weaknesses, but I have the tendency to obsess over a project way before I even pick up a pencil or before I even get in front of a computer, is I just think about it a lot. And a lot. I mean, it would be like middle of night, an idea pops into my head, or in the shower, or on a run. Like it's sometimes if I'm working on a project, it can't escape me. Um, and so to me, I think that's probably what has led to a lot of successful projects that I've done, is that I really do truly care about the project. Um, I care probably more about the project than I do about getting it done quickly or getting it done
Mhm.
efficiently or creative hours, right? Like, someone told me years ago that when you're billing a client, you should bill them creative hours based on how much time not only you design, but you think about the project. And to me, that would be impossible because I do think about a project way too much. Um, I love having, with the freelance clients that I have, I love sitting down and just really hearing what they're trying to accomplish. And
Yeah.
then I think a long time about what would accomplish that. And then, weeks later, will a design pop out of it. So that's probably, that's why that's how I best reflect how a project really matters, is that I do truly care about it.
Yeah. Have you ever turned down work because your values don't align with the brand that wants you to do work? Has that ever
I've,
come up?
I've turned down a few projects for sure. I get hit up from a lot of real estate uh, agents or brands outside of the Sotheby's world. And I turned all of that down just because it's a conflict of interest for sure. Um, I have turned down a few projects. One of them was, I won't name them particularly, but it was something that I really wanted to have in my portfolio. It was for a liquor brand, like a high profile liquor brand that I really wanted to work with because I don't have any spirit, in my portfolio. But
Hmm.
this is for a great brand that was trying to do some really incredible things. Um, and I had to turn down the gig after doing some preliminary work because the mission of what they were trying to accomplish just not and what they're willing to pay did not align for sure. So that,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah, those are tough decisions, but I think, and I've been there too. I think staying true to yourself and what drives you and keeps you sort of honest in your own mind is really important. So, um, you know, looking ahead a year or more, you see yourself in a very different place doing what you're doing now. What's the future hold for you?
yeah, it's a great question. I, you know, I have no plans on leaving the Sotheby's brand. I still think I have a lot to give. When I get to the point where I feel like I've maxed out on creative ideas, then I'll look elsewhere. But there's still so much to give within the brand that I currently work for. So I don't plan on going anywhere there. But I still moonlight and do a ton of freelance stuff, and I would love to continue doing that. I have one project on the proposal stage right now that I hope actually happens. It's for like a boutique hotel. So I would love if I spoke to you a year from now and said like, well, look, it actually happened, and look at all these crazy ideas. So yeah, I hope to get more freelance clients because I think it's great to, sometimes, like I said before, I tend to obsess over things. When you're the in-house guy at a brand for 8 years, you kind of eat, sleep, and breathe the same thing, every day. And so when you get a new project, it kind of shakes you a little bit, and you're looking at different colors and different fonts for the first
Right.
time. And the more you can kind of shake yourself, I think it benefits both your day-to-day gig and the freelance gig. So I love getting kind of shook up a little bit and wrapping sinking my teeth into a different brand, which is fun.
That's awesome. Well, just to bring this to a close, Brian, I feel like I have 20 more questions for you, but we don't have that time. Is a little rapid fire session. So these are don't think too hard. There's no right, there's no wrong. Okay.
Okay.
What's your favorite social media?
Hmm. When social media is part of your day to day, right? It's your job to produce content for social media. It's kind of exhausting, from my opinion. So I don't tend to consume social media in an enjoyable way anymore. I feel
Okay.
like, you know what I
Fair.
mean? So I would say if I had to pick, I think oddly, I think LinkedIn is probably one of the only places where it's still a very positive environment. And every time I'm on there, it's like, oh, somebody got a new job or somebody's working on something exciting. So it does feel very positive to go there compared
Okay.
to. So if I had to pick, I would say LinkedIn.
Okay. All right. Second question. Taylor Swift, marketing genius or fast fad?
Ooh, I'd say marketing genius. I have a almost 12-year-old daughter, so I definitely know the impact of Taylor Swift on our household. She is definitely she's a genius.
Okay. Pineapple on pizza, yes or no?
No, no. You're talking. I'm a New Yorker. No, nope.
Okay. A book you always recommend?
um, I don't really recommend a lot of books, which is kind of odd for someone who worked in the book industry for a long time. Um, so, I'm distracted right now because it's actually snowing outside.
I know. It's beautiful. It's
Yeah,
gorgeous.
I'm sorry. Yeah, it took us out of the rapid fire. Let's see.
So you can
I'm reading,
pass.
no, I'm not gonna pass. I'm reading the Rick Rubin book right now on like creative thinking, and I do recommend that a lot to a lot of creatives that I work with. I can't think of the title off the top of my head. It's like I forget, but it's the Rick Rubin book on creative thinking. But
Awesome.
I don't tend to recommend a lot of reading.
Okay. And last one, where's your next vacation?
I'm turning 40 in a few months, so we already have the next trip booked. We're going to Paris and to Germany, so that's my next trip. Yeah,
That is fantastic. Well,
yeah.
Brian, this has been a ton of fun. And I love your insights, and it's been great hearing your perspectives on branding, marketing, design, the creative process. So for those guests who want to find Brian, he is a freelance brand designer. We'll link his website in our show notes for you. And Brian, again, thank you for being on the M Word podcast.
Thank you so much, Jennifer. This has been great, and hopefully we'll do it again sometime.
Absolutely. Thanks for listening to The M Word. I hope you enjoyed today's episode. Subscribe and never miss a podcast. Visit arlingtonstrategy.com for more. The M Word is an Arlington Strategy production hosted by Jennifer Mulchandani. Our theme music is by Moochie. Graphic design by Kayla Fagan and Emily Rare. Sound engineering and editing by Ben Mulchandani.